Awesome. We're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I have a guest with me. Her name is Heather Hart, and she is a plant-based ultra runner as well as ultra running coach. And we're going to talk about all things plant-based ultra running today. I know in this community we have those that are ultra runners. I haven't quite got there yet, but that is the goal one day to do an ultra. But I know there's a lot of, definitely this audience has a lot of those that are either marathon runners or, those interested in ultra running, or maybe they already are doing ultras as well as plant-based. So I think this is a great topic, and I know a lot of you will love this conversation. So tell us, Heather, tell us who you are, a little more about yourself. I'm sure you could probably do a better job than I did.
I'm Heather Hart. I am a ACSM certified exercise physiologist and running coach. I'm certified through RRCA and USCA as an ultra running coach. Let's see. I have been in the fitness industry for the last 11 years. Initially working in gyms. That's kind of like my happy place, working with strength and conditioning and, one-on-one with people. But I love running. I've always loved running. And probably about 6 years ago, people were really always asking me, can you write me a training plan, help me with this? And I shied away from it. But in 2017, my husband and I decided to go all in, and we created a coaching business specifically geared at runners. And it's kind of evolved over the years to focus mainly on ultra runners. So whether it's first time ultra runners or, kind of intermediate or looking to set a PR or a new distance, that's mainly who we work with. So professionally, that's who I am. Personally, I'm a mom of 2 teenagers. I am plant-based. I have been for almost 10 years now. And I obviously love ultra running. Also, big into strength training and also adventure racing. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. I love it. I love all of it. And I see some of your running adventures behind you. I think I have mine as well hanging up. I was like, oh, that's so cool. So how long have you been plant-based and doing what you're doing now? So as an ultra running coach.
Yeah. So I first became a vegetarian in 2012. So this will be 10 years this summer.
Awesome.
Yeah, and to be quite honest, I started simply because the guy I was dating, who would end up becoming my husband, he was a vegetarian. He had been plant-based at that time for at least 20 something years, and he kind of convinced me to give it a try, and I did, and I've stuck with it ever since. So that's how long I've been doing that, and I've been running as long, if not actually longer, and really more so in the ultra marathon community since 2015.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. And can you share more about your journey and how that's impacted like what you're doing now and, in your life and
Absolutely.
professionally?
Yeah. So, when I first switched to plant-based, I wouldn't say that immediately I was like, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. Actually, I would say quite the opposite. I went into it without having any idea of what I was doing. I didn't have very good grasp on nutrition to begin with. So, cutting out animal products, kind of all I did was shift to eating a lot of pasta and pizza and things like that, which I think is probably very common in, people who are making that transition. Yeah. And so initially I didn't feel that great, but over time I started to recognize that a lot of issues I had throughout my life with just like, occasional stomach pain or upset stomach and energy levels kind of disappeared. And as I learned over the years to be a better plant-based athlete and to eat better, it's definitely helped with me with my fitness as a whole, both as an athlete and just like general health. So
Sure.
And I've also been doing this long enough now, almost a decade, that I have seen the transition from not having a lot of options available, that were plant-based, to now you can go to the grocery store and, if you're craving something that's like, oh, I miss chicken nuggets, there's like 5, a freezer doors worth of of options now. So it's so much
Mm-hmm.
easier.
It is.
And as a professional, I have noticed more and more people making the transition as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
My background isn't in nutrition. I kind of refer out. I'm like, not my scope of practice, but I do provide that support, for people who have questions. And yeah, it's awesome to see how many people are really making that transition. Even if it's not full time, just
right.
even if they're just trying to add more plant-based eating into their life and cut back on their animal products. Yeah, it's been really cool to see.
Yeah, cool. So cool. So what do you think have you seen with your athletes, even though you don't specifically give them, nutrition coaching, those that are plant-based, what do you see like compared to like other athletes that may not be plant-based as in the ultra running world? Like, are there like benefits that you kind of noticed with most of the plant-based ultra runners?
That's a great question. I'm not necessarily sure I'd say I notice a ton because, again, I don't really talk to them specifically about their day-to-day nutrition. When we're talking about like race nutrition, it's kind of rare for people to really eat meat while running anyway. It does happen. A lot of people who have seen trail or ultra marathon aid stations, like there's definitely bacon around and things like that. So most of these items are kind of plant-based anyway. I think that it's more when people are going full vegan that we start to see them having some issues with finding things that they can eat. But all of that said, I definitely have noticed athletes saying that they do feel better, whether it's kind of that energy level or not having as much gastrointestinal issues, especially when running, when they're eating plant-based. Yeah, I would say that's what I notice most of all.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that I think is a big challenge for people too. I hear that a lot. Like people are always, especially as runners, they're always like talking about, their GI system and they're like, well, I can't eat this or that. So I think that's really cool to notice that, and just to realize like, okay, they are, this is helping their GI system because some people might think, oh, plant-based, that's a lot of fiber, like that's not good for my GI when you're running, but it can be good. So
yeah, and it's I'm an ultra running coach, and so there's like no such thing as TMI, so I'm gonna go there.
Go for it.
But like one thing I've noticed personally, and I've heard from other clients as well, is that when you're plant-based, all that fiber does help you become more regular. So like there's not that fear of like, oh, I'm not gonna go to like, am I gonna be able to go to the bathroom before my race starts? Like, of course you are. It helps you become more regular. So it's not something that I even have to worry about anymore. Whereas back, 10 years ago, that was a huge concern for me. Like, how am I going to make sure that I'm regular and I can go before a big race? Yeah. So long live the plants for that one.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point to make because that's probably the worst fear we have, right? Especially for a longer race. I would assume that's probably even more important because you're like, oh, I don't want to have to go while I'm out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always something we want to make sure that we're doing, and that's such a good point. The more regular you are, then you're less likely to have an issue on race day or be worried about that. Am I going to be able to go before I run? So that's great. What about struggles? Are there any struggles you see the plant-based ultra runners make more than others?
I think this is probably, and I'm sure you can confirm because you're the RD here, but I feel like everybody when they switch to plant-based have that immediate fear of protein. Like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get enough protein? And I had that fear too. And in retrospect, I think it's because we see all these like single food items in the meat eating world or that are like hugely dense in protein. It's like, well, all I have to do is eat this slab of chicken or this burger and I'm going to get all this protein, and there's no equivalent in the plant world. So I think initially people kind of freak out about that and they're like, how am I going to get enough protein? How do I know if I'm getting enough protein? And they immediately reach for the like smoothies or the bars and things like that. But it took me a long time to learn that if you're eating properly and you're adding these little things everywhere, like flax seeds and chia seeds and pumpkin seeds and getting your greens, like you're going to get enough protein. You just have to not think of it as like this one big chunk of time where you're going to have, all my protein right now, but rather you're spreading it out over the course of the day. So with my athletes, that's something that I've noticed that they have that fear. Like, am I getting enough protein? Am I getting enough protein? So that's when I always refer out. I'm like, listen, maybe spend a couple weeks with an RD who can help you kind of track your food, see where you're missing things, if at all, and see how you can add little things, because it doesn't have to be this like mega hyper focus. Yeah. And that was really hard for me. I won't lie, it took me probably 8 of the last 10 years to figure that out.
Wow.
But now that I have, it's really not hard to get in the protein I need. So that's the biggest one. And then the second biggest thing for me, and I think this is a regional thing. So I'm from Vermont originally, and I currently live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It's not the most friendly place to be a plant-based athlete or plant-based at all. So when you go out to restaurants and stuff, trying to like find something to eat that feels like quality food and isn't just an iceberg lettuce side salad, that can be a struggle too. But over time in practice, you really you learn what you can get where, and it's not so bad anymore.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I found that too, that as athletes kind of learn what to look for or what to ask for when they're out to eating. But it's so true. It's those places that I think there's more options now. There's so many places that still that I've been to that are like, well, the only other option is a salad, and it's like, as an athlete, I'm like, yeah, this isn't gonna do it. I run a lot. I need a little bit more than just lettuce. So I totally get that. But yeah, and I know you mentioned as well, I wanted to go back to the options that they have for ultra running, because I know you probably know more of that than I certainly do about what is offered. And I hear a lot of ultra runners kind of complain or kind of mention like, there's not just a lot of options for us that are plant-based. So can you talk more about that and kind of what is offered usually at those stations?
Absolutely. And I have a great story to go with this too, because it's one of my favorites, but I'll get to that. So, it's definitely getting better. I'll say that up front. People are becoming more, race directors are becoming more aware of the fact that a lot of athletes are plant-based, and not just plant-based, but like vegan. They don't want cheese, So, a typical aid station for an ultra marathon. First of all, I'll explain how it's different from road running. Like typically at a marathon, you're going to have water and Gatorade, and occasionally maybe a table with like oranges and some gels or bananas. An ultra marathon, especially like the 50 miles and beyond, it's a buffet. You're going to roll up and there is going to be like candy and sandwiches and chips and like homemade desserts and soda and water and Gatorade and like you name it. There's a ton of food, fruit, like there's so much stuff, because there is no way you can get through these distances without fueling a lot. And in trying to even keep up with these calories, like you need options, you need variety, just to keep your stomach happy and to keep your mind happy too. So there's never a shortage of food. As far as being plant-based, you've got your junk food options. So those are always available, like your candies and cookies and things like that. But then you're looking at like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, which for me, I don't like peanut butter. I know it's like it's the sin of ultra running. I'm not allergic. I've never liked it. So that's never an option for me, but you'll find lots of like grilled cheese sandwiches or quesadillas, which again, that's not really going to work if you're not eating cheese. And then there's often like burgers or bacon, like I said. So it can be difficult, especially, the more kind of, I guess, intricate your food needs are. Like if we're going plant-based and then vegan and then adding in some people can't do gluten, it gets hard. So, what I'm always recommending to my athletes is to kind of practice what practice options and practice variety, so that when you do get to an aid station, if you want to take something off of that table, you have a general idea of like, okay, I know I can kind of tolerate this food group and this food group and this food group. So if what you were hoping was there isn't, or if it's not very plant-based friendly, you know that you can tolerate something that, maybe isn't the best, like a handful of, I don't know, like Swedish fish or something like that, to get you to the next point where you do have something that works for you. And that also kind of comes down to knowing that you may have to carry your own food if it's really going to be bad. But so my story I love to share is that one of my absolute favorite race directors, hopefully he's listening, Chad Hoffa of Eagle Endurance, when my husband and I moved down here to South Carolina in 2015, he was hardcore, like, this is the food I'm having at the end of the race, and this is what's at the aid station. And if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, too bad, bring your own food. Like, he was really kind of like tough about it. And we're like, okay, we'll do what we want, whatever. Fast forward to now, and he's like, have you guys tried Impossible Burgers? I bought Impossible Burgers. And so like there's no meat. And so we're finishing this one race, and we're volunteering for the longer distances, and people are coming across the finish line, like the 50 miler, the 100K, the 100 miler. And he's like, Impossible Burger? It just made me laugh to see how like over the years, he's really, opened his heart to his plant-based athletes, but just it goes to show that I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that, the athlete population is shifting. And if you want to keep them happy as customers, and just accommodate, you've got to have more plant-based options. So it's been cool to see.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And it's so good to hear that, especially race directors are kind of seeing that and offering these other options that, that the runners want. Because certainly I think that is the hardest thing I see with plant-based, especially getting into that ultra distance and running farther and farther, is how important those calories are. And then it's like, okay, like you said, when we put all these, when we're gluten-free or no animal products, then it becomes even harder. And it's like, well, we got to eat something. So I love that you shared, having like a couple things in mind of what you can do, because then also on top of that is also knowing what your body can do, and how you can do that is by practice. I always encourage everybody, like, practice, during those long runs. Don't get to a race and try anything new. We really got to practice and know what works.
Absolutely. And that's, I find with ultra running, both from personal experience, and as a coach, that the number one cause of a DNF is nutrition. It's impossible to keep up with your caloric deficit. There's just no way to replace it over these distances. And as you get further and further and further, you're digging that hole even deeper of not being able to fuel enough. And so if you can't stay on top of it, there just comes a point where everything falls apart. Our current recommendations for our ultra runners is 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour minimum. And if they can tolerate upwards of 90, like, great. But most people, that takes a lot of practice. A lot of our newer runners who are coming from the marathon or shorter distances, that's a huge jump from what they're used to. I know personally, when I started, I was like, a gel every 90 minutes or so, that's fine. But no, that's not even like half of what you need per hour. So it's tough. It definitely can be tough. So same thing. I recommend right from the get-go. I'm like, okay, I know like we have 20 to 30 weeks to train, and you're only doing an 8-mile long run, but you're going to eat. We're going to practice, because you have to start. You have to train your stomach, and you have to find what works for you. And even, in my experience, I've found over the years that changes too. What worked for you for a while doesn't really work anymore sometimes. So it's a never-ending battle.
It is. Yeah. It's something you're going to constantly be trying and figuring out, and just practicing as you go. But I totally agree too. Like, starting even in those smaller miles, starting to practice that fueling. Because I know so many people that will tell me, I'll post a video on TikTok or something talking about this, and people will comment, well, I didn't even fuel at all during a half marathon. And I'm like, Really? I mean, you can get through it, but you're not
Mhm.
going to do your best. You're not going to
Mhm.
perform at your best. And especially if you want to train more eventually to a longer distance run and getting into ultra running, then it's like, okay, then you're really going to have to learn. So it's good to start,
Mhm.
good to start low, even on that 8-10 mile run, have something to eat to start training your body
Absolutely.
to be able to take in food.
Absolutely. And it's been
Yeah.
cool to see that shift as well. Like I'm seeing more and more people in your industry starting to target ultra runners and runners in general because
Yeah.
I know when I started distance running, even just half and full marathons, there wasn't a ton of information. Like all
Yeah.
that I knew was what was on the back of the goo package. Like whatever it told me, I'm like, okay, I guess that's what we do. There was
Right.
really not a ton of information, and it kind of almost felt like, well, my performance matters most of all, so if I can just avoid an upset stomach by not eating, then that's what I'm going to do. And there wasn't much talk about how that's the worst thing you can do. So
Right.
it's really good to see that shift,
Yeah.
but yeah, we need
Yes.
more of it because I see a ton
Mhm.
of people who come to us and I'm like, okay, talk to me about what you're eating in your long run. And it's just not enough. It's not even close. And
Yeah.
for no other reason than they didn't know.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that to me is like, well, what are we doing wrong? We need
Right.
to be educating people more and getting this out there. And that's why I love doing things like this and just talking about it because
Hmm.
it is so important. And especially because people too, they don't want a DNF.
Right.
They do all that training. I'm sure they want to finish.
Hmm.
And that's really sad to finish, not be able to complete it because you just didn't know or just didn't fuel properly.
Yeah. And I think like, this may be a bit of a stretch, but I'm going to go there.
Yeah.
I've noticed, and I feel like a lot of people maybe get into running as a means of weight loss, and like they kind
Yeah.
of fall in love with running, which is awesome. But there's this like transition, or there isn't a transition where they realize that, okay, running for weight loss and trying to burn calories is one thing, running for performance is a whole different thing. And we
Yes.
don't want to add calories if we're trying to lose weight, but we do want to add calories if we're trying to perform well. And like the connection
Yes.
doesn't kind of happen, again, because
Yeah.
I don't think enough people have been really talking about it. So I
Yeah.
have this conversation with clients all the time, who they're not even actively trying to lose weight, but they just don't
Yeah.
kind of recognize the importance of
Right.
not just fueling before and after, but like during. It's so
Yes.
important. Your body needs it. Absolutely needs
Yes.
it.
Yes, it does. Yeah, yeah, yes, and I love talking about that. I think I talk about that so much because I always feel like it's such a good point to get across. Is eating plant-based for weight loss is so different than eating plant-based for performance.
Mm-hmm.
And my focus has always been more on that performance, and I still get people that are eating for weight loss, and it's almost like a mindset shift that I have to
Yeah.
kind of work with them and changing that mindset around it and kind of get them to see like why it's not the same and how
Yeah.
it's different. Because if you're so focused on calories, calories, you're probably going to be less resistant to eating more
Mm-hmm.
and eating during. You're gonna be like, oh, I can make it, I can do it, I can do it without it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, just society as a whole needs to make the shift of
Yes.
understanding that like performance is like such a great thing, and weight loss shouldn't even be a part
Yes.
of it. and
Right.
and that's easy for me to say, coming kind of from my background, and I respect and understand that a lot of people do exercise for weight loss, and that's
Sure.
completely fine. But um I often say to athletes, like, why are you here? Like, do you want to do well?
Yes.
Then who cares what the scale says? How do you feel?
Yeah.
How are you performing? That's what matters. Fuel
Right.
the body. And I
Hmm.
love seeing more and more athletes kind of talking about that too, and being an
Yeah.
example and saying, I don't care what I look like or what size my pants are or that the scale's gone up. Let's look at my PRs. Like let's look at my lifts have gotten heavier, my mile time's gotten faster. That's what matters. And
Yeah.
I think the more we can kind of push that mindset, the better all of
Yes.
this will get over time.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And I think too, focusing on even that performance, more of a performance mindset, that helps to also kind of take the focus to health
Mhm.
and not as much as just that weight loss, right? And just that number, what size you are, but overall health and wellness. If you're probably meeting those times, or doing well or lifting more, you're probably just feeling better in general, and your overall health is actually probably better no matter what the scale says.
Exactly. And then you stop caring as much
Yeah.
about the scale because you're like, I
Yes,
feel good. Who cares?
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, love it. I love it. So is there any like resource or anything that has really like helped you either on your journey, or maybe something you give to clients that, around plant-based ultra running, that you're like, read this will help you, or, get this product, or
Um,
tool, or whatever that is?
yeah, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a product, but I definitely have a handful of resources, especially on like Instagram, and other people other
Yeah.
professionals that I'll point my clients to.
Yeah.
And one of them is who I've personally worked with as a client. I call him Coach Whale of On Pace Wellness. He is a plant-based nutrition coach out of he's on the West Coast in Portland, Oregon. And so I don't believe he's a
Awesome.
registered dietitian, but he does have a master's degree in nutrition. And I think he's just kind of chosen to go a different path with that. But he's been such an incredible resource for me in kind of helping me to really look at what I'm eating and how that's affecting my body. And at the same time, like, completely leaving out any sort of guilt. Like, he never addresses what you're eating and saying like, oh, that's bad. It's just like, well, what
Right.
else can we add to make things good, and
Mhm.
he's just a ton of
That's great.
information and knowledge. So he's one of the people I always kind of push to.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think of what else I do. Yeah, it's funny. I'm not gonna lie, I'm very hands off with nutrition with my clients because I am a huge fan of scope of practice, and that is not mine.
Good.
I can teach you what to eat between the time you start your run and when you finish your run. um,
Good.
yeah. So I have some rest or cookbooks that I've loved. Are a handful of the ones Runner's World has put out over the years. They're not all plant based, but they do have some great plant based recipes in there.
Mhm.
No Meat Athlete, he's got some great ones as well.
Yes,
Uh,
it's a great resource.
yeah. But my bottom line is that when
Yeah.
people have a question, I refer out to a specialist, and I highly
Awesome.
encourage all the other running coaches out there to do the same. Like, you are not a
Yes.
registered dietitian. This is not your scope of practice. And so the best thing you can do
Mhm.
for your clients is to say, um, you know, let's go to somebody who knows more about this than I do and get you the
Yeah.
correct answers. There's so much
Yeah,
misinformation.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I know I don't need to tell you that, but especially with women, and especially women coming up to like premenopause and menopause and postmenopause.
Yes.
There's so much like conflicting information. Like,
Yeah.
do we fast? Do we not
Yes.
fast? Can I eat this? Can I not eat that? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's always my recommendation that you see a true professional. Leave like the running and stuff to the running coaches and go see somebody who has an education and certification like you in
Yeah.
nutrition.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And any quotes or sayings that you like live by, or like motivational quotes that you kind of like give to your clients if they're struggling with motivation or anything like that?
Yeah, this is gonna sound not motivating, but I promise it comes full circle. But I always tell my clients, you are not an elite athlete. You're not paying your mortgage with race winnings. That sounds so negative, but like, the reality is I think that as athletes, we invest so much time and like emotional effort into our training and our racing, and when things don't go the way that we want them to, because like life happens, or like, all of a sudden
Mhm.
your refrigerator broke, and like, your kids are sick, or all these things are happening and you can't train, you beat yourself up about it, and you're like, and it's just like, I've seen it happen so many times. Clients get really down on themselves because of things they can't control. And so that's when I try to tell them, like, you're not an elite athlete. You're not paying your bills with your winnings. So, like, why are we
Yeah.
doing this? We're doing this because we love running. That's it. We love it. So
Mhm.
who cares if you have to miss this? Who cares if you show up to your race like 2 training runs less than you wanted to. Don't ever forget why you're doing this and that you love it, and like take that pressure off. It's okay. It's okay to not be perfect. None of us are perfect. Like just kind of roll with it, let it go, and move on. And that's kind of my husband and I, that's our coaching philosophy. That is like the kind of base we built our business on, is that we are real, like everyday athletes, and we get it. We get that life happens. We don't expect our clients to be perfect. We expect our clients to like want to get to the end of a training cycle and not hate running.
Right.
So that's kind of like, the philosophy that I live by, both with my own training and my clients, is that like life is short, have fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. Strive to be your best, but like don't beat yourself up about it.
Yeah. I love that. I really do. I think so many of us can get so into like, just having that end goal, I want to run this marathon, I want to run this 50K. And then we're so focused on that we forget, why we enjoy running, or why we got into it in the first place, or, we beat ourselves up for, mistakes that we make, or not being able to go on that run. It's like, but we have these lives and we can only do so much.
Exactly. And it's funny because I truly believe that a lot of elite athletes are kinder to themselves than often us, like everyday athletes.
Yes.
They really are. And they kind of, they know when to push and they know when to take a step back, and they recognize the sport for what it is. But I think a lot of us just, it is our, and I'm there too. Like, this is a huge part of my identity. And so, it can be really easy to let that consume you. But you have to remember that it's fun. And then the other thing I always tell my athletes is like, do you want to be doing this still when you're 60, 70, 80, like for life? Then like roll with it. Remember that there's always going to be highs and lows. It's not going to be perfect. Just keep going.
Yes. I love that. And anything else that you want to talk about or mention? I'll open it up to you if there's anything that I missed out.
Oh, sure. Let's see.
I feel like there's so much more.
We talked about the fueling, which is so super important. I don't know. Ask me questions about ultra running. I don't know. Like, what do you guys want to know?
Right. What about training? What does that look like?
Absolutely. So ultra marathon training is going to look different for every, obviously every athlete, based on what they're training for and where they're coming from, at like their background. So, if I was training a first time, let's say 50 miler, and the longest race they've ever done before is a marathon, it's going to be a lot of that long, slow running. I think a big misconception with a lot of people who do the shorter road distances is they get to that marathon finish line and they're like, there is no way I could run another step. But what you don't realize is that once you get into ultras, and especially when they're on trails, that overall pace and effort slows way down. And when you slow yourself way down, you're able to go a lot longer. So we kind of, we're training the body to do that, specifically from being able to handle kind of that impact and that stimulus over these long distances. So it's a lot of that. There is still going to be, some harder intensity workouts. I'm a huge fan of strength training, so I recommend that as well. But I think that the mileage, like the overall volume, is a lot less than a lot of people think it might be for ultra running. So for example, if I have a first time 100-mile client, chances are they're going to max out at a volume of like 65 to 70 miles per week, which, if I'm being honest, like there's marathoners who run that. So I think a lot of people stray away from the thought that an ultra could ever be in the cards for them, because they think there's no way I could have the time, or I could be running 100 or 120 miles per week, but that's not necessary always. So that's one of the big differences, I think, in the training. When you're on trails, we're focusing a lot more on time rather than pace, or like, the time you're on your feet rather than overall pace or distance, which is a huge transition for my road runners, because they're used to this, like constantly like,
yes,
look at my pace, look at my pace. I'm like, we're not doing that today. Like, we're gonna keep it nice and easy and not worry about your pace. So it's definitely a whole different, I compare it to like apples and oranges. It's both fruit, they're both running, but they're not the same sport at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Very cool. And on the weekend, from what I understand, like your weekend runs, you're running like back to back instead of like one long run on the weekend for a marathon. It's like 2 long runs.
Yeah. That is a common approach for ultra running. Not everybody does it, but it is a common approach. And the reason being is that we can kind of spread that stimulus out over 2 days, and minimize the amount of damage we're doing to our body, and then therefore minimize the amount of recovery we need. Anytime you're going more than like, 25 to 30 miles at a time, we're really significantly increasing the recovery time needed. So it just doesn't make sense to constantly do like a 50-mile run this weekend and weekend after weekend. Whereas if you could do, 20 miles one day and then pair that with like another 3-4 hours the next day, and we're talking like at peak training, this is not at the beginning, you can kind of get that stimulus without risking everything, risking that you're going to injure yourself and not be able to continue training. So the back-to-back training is it's a big thing. One of the great debates in the ultra coaching world right now is whether or not it's learning to train on tired legs. I know some of the more popular coaches swear it's not, and physiologically it's not, but psychologically there's a lot that can do for you. Ultra marathons are mentally very hard. You have to learn how to, when your body's saying, yeah, no, we're done, this is enough, we don't want to go on, you have to learn how to say, actually, we're going to keep going. And you have to tap into this. So like that second long run, it's hard to wake up the day after you've already done a long run and your legs are tired and you're kind of feeling sluggish, and to know you have to do it again, it can be hard. And so you kind of build that mental strength as well to say like, I can do it. And then come race day, when you're struggling, you can tap into that and say, I've done it before, I know how to do this, I know how to ignore that tired feeling and just keep going.
Yeah. Awesome. And what about strength training? Since you mentioned that's kind of like, something you're passionate about, how do you fit in? I would just love to know, like, how do you, help your clients with this and fitting in that strength training with running 60 to 70 miles? I know so many people like struggle with that. They're like, well, how do I have time to do, the running, the stretching, the strength training, and all of it?
Yeah, it is hard. And so what we always remember is specificity. So like if there is no time and you can barely get your running done, then we're not even going to worry about strength training for this training cycle, because specificity matters. That is number one. If you do have some time, then we kind of take what time you have available and let's see what we can fit into that. I think that with strength training, there's like so many different ways you can go about it that it gets confusing to runners, and they think, well, how am I going to have time like to do, back day and now, chest day and a leg day? What we really need to do is just kind of smush it all into one very effective workout. And that's why I'm a big fan of like our movement patterns for getting our strength training done. So like if you can fit in a push, a pull, a squat, a hinge, and a rotation, done, like get your 3 sets or whatever you're doing based on what phase you're in training, of those 7 movements in twice a week, like that's better than nothing. So you don't have to spend an hour a day in the gym. Like let's set aside, 45 minutes twice a week, and that's going to give you huge improvements right there. As far as fitting that in with like the 70 miles per week, that's where we have to do like an inverse kind of, when your strength training volume's high, it's when your running volume's low. And as the running volume starts to come up, we're going to shift that as well. So for my clients and even myself, when I'm getting closer to race day and my mileage is high, my strength training is like bare bones. It's light weights. It's, higher repetitions. It's just kind of like keeping the movement patterns going, but we're not focusing on making any strength gains. That's not the time. Again, specificity. Right? So it always has to, we always have to make sure that the strength training is helping our running and not hindering. The second it starts to hinder, it's got to go, or it needs to be transitioned. Right. And that's just during a race specific training cycle. And then the last thing I like to remind my clients is that, and everybody really, is that when you're adding strength training on top of ultra running, you've got to eat even more.
Yes.
How much food and how much rest and how much sleep is going to contribute to all this recovery you need now. So you cannot slack on that, or it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah, absolutely true. And so how can listeners find you?
I'm having some, let me try again. I was having some feedback there. What was the question? I'm sorry.
How can listeners find you? I work with you.
Can you hear that feedback?
Oh, is there static? Yeah, there's a little staticky.
Let me see if this helps. Is that better?
Yes. Yes, it went away.
Okay, good. I think I had to plug in my phone. It didn't charge earlier when I tried to. Okay, one more time. I'm sorry.
That's okay. How can listeners or anyone that's watching find you or work with you?
Oh, great question. Thank you for asking. So my main blog is relentlessforwardcommotion.com, and my Instagram and Facebook are the same handle, Relentless Forward Commotion. More specifically, our coaching is heartendurancecoaching.com, and then our handles on all the social media are the same.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Okay, I have one more question for you. If today was your last day, what would, on this earth or this planet, what would you want everyone to know that's like on their plant-based running journey, ultra running journey? What would you tell them? If there's one thing you could leave them with. Or two things, it's fine.
I give them two things? Sure. Well, one's a tip and one's just another thing. So first of all, I'd say don't stress about the protein as much as you think you need to stress about the protein. Like look at your overall nutrition and like don't freak out about it. You will find a way. So let that go. And then the other thing is I would just say thank you, for choosing a plant-based approach. I don't talk about it often, but I'm in it for ethical reasons. I love animals. I cannot fathom eating them, and I don't think we need to. So I love when people make that choice. So thank you.
Awesome. I love that. Absolutely. I absolutely agree. We should, thank people for doing what they can for the planet and saving animals, which is definitely a good thing. And I know important for all of us. So thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for taking your time to chat with me today. And I'm sure we will touch base and talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was great chatting with you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.